And for those who enjoy this channel and would love to support us financially, please feel free to hit that donate link. We'd greatly appreciate it. God bless.
So I get into this argument with this creationist who was a young Earth creationist, and there was one of the studies about mitochondrial Eve.
Oh God. Yeah.
And in this study, they have a range of numbers for her for the molecular clock. This was when the concepts of the molecular clock were just being tested out. And you should take if you get a range of numbers, you should pick an average, right? What's the most, what's in the middle. But you have the oldest state and you have the youngest state, and the youngest state in this case was something like 6,000 years.
Oh God, no.
Yeah.
All right, everybody. Let's jump right into the story of mitochondrial Eve and talk about the timeline from the past until present with all of the different information that they have given the public. But let's jump into the science first. Going back to 1996, we find that Howell discovered that looking at the control region of mitochondrial DNA, that there were 2 mutations in 81 transmission events. What this means in layman terms is that there are mutations which are transmitted to future generations, which can be observed and cataloged. This opened the eyes of the secular community that maybe their fossil record clock assumptions are wrong. These results placed a most recent common ancestor just thousands of years ago. The reason that they had all assumed that they would find a slow clock is because they all believe in deep time-scale evolution to be true, and invented a dating technique to validate this belief by calibrating a clock against the fossil record. By adding in an assumed ape-human split 6.5 million years ago, they were able to obtain mutation rates based in favor of evolutionism. A year later, a study was done, peer-reviewed and published, which again shocked the scientific community. It obtained the results, placing mitochondrial Eve, the mother of all living humans, at just 6,500 years old. But this date was not good for evolutionists, for many obvious reasons. And they were very angry that a creationist is the one who discovered these numbers. So they came along a year later and retested using much more advanced methods and using a huge demographic, narrowing down the results. Unfortunately for them, down to 6,000 years exactly, proving the biblical timeline and a young mitochondrial Eve. All of the results proved that their phylogenetic assumption method rates were nonsense and should be thrown out. They have proven a high observable substitution rates in human mitochondrial DNA, placing it at roughly 20 times higher than their estimated rates. These findings were so accurate they were even adopted by forensic analysis by the FBI and used today, so their accuracy is spot on, regardless of what evolutionists would like you to believe. Another large study using 2 different methods also came to this same conclusion. And that same year, a separate study confirmed it again. Now remember, one should detect around 1 mutation per 90 transmission events. MUM discovered 1 mutation per 59 transmission events, which is even faster. And Holland, again the same year, looking at HVR1 and HVR2, discovered 10 mutations per 306 transmission events, again confirming young Earth creation. A few studies obtained few mutations, or none. This was because they either neglected to look at germline and somatic mutations, or they changed the way they define mutation rates. For example, here, we define the mutation rate as the rate at which mtDNA type of an individual changes, rather than at the rate of mutation accumulation in individual mitochondria. So again, it goes back to a biased way of thinking to obtain the results desired. As you can see it here in action looking at Cavalier L's work in early 2000. He listed 0 mutations out of 292 transmission events. But this is because he only counted homeoplasmic nucleotide substitutions and also used estimated divergent rates as approximations. And even he admits in his conclusion that the pedigree rate of the control region is significantly higher than the phylogeny divergent rate assumption. So what happened is they wanted to figure out what's going on here with this. So what they did in 2003 is they took all the pedigree studies, or trio studies as they're now called, and they were put for accuracy using all possible effects, from homeoplastic changes, selection, random genetic drift, and more. The conclusion confirmed earlier results, even with the studies that showed zero mutation added in with this calculation, and that was that their phylogenetic assumption methods all failed, and young Earth creation rates were much more accurate. So taken into account that even by adding in biased studies, which gave them no inherited mutations in trio studies, they still helped confirm our suspicions. And in that same year, the Annals of Human Genetics confirmed young Earth creation mutation rates. A year later came testing in the form of mathematical models, using all data compiled and focusing on different approaches. Both results they obtained concluded that a recent common ancestor for all of mankind was just a few thousand years ago. Then again, in 2012, we were vindicated yet again. They discovered, looking at 15,585 human protein coding regions, that SNVs, known as single nucleotide variants, that the human population growth was recent at just 5,115 years ago, max. Not even close to a 200,000-year-old bottleneck, like they tell the public. So again, observable rates completely contradict the evolutionary assumption rates. Then, in 2012, it was discovered that nearly all near-neutral mutations and harmful deleterious gene variants arose in the last 5,000 years. They state the vast majority of these may have no phenotypic or functional consequences we yet know of, meaning he's mostly talking about near-neutral mutations handed down from generation to generation. In all, about 14% of all mutations identified were found to be harmful. The results are based on a genetic study of roughly 6,500 Americans of all demographics. The study's conclusions suggested that the human population acquired an abundance of single nucleotide genetic variants in a relatively short time. This is just another piece of evidence that is a disaster for the evolutionary theory, but not a problem whatsoever for us young Earth creationists. We have now mapped the entire genome of worms. We know everything there is to know about their genome. And after that, they looked at their mutation rates in hopes to confirm evolution and finally answer the mutation rate problem. Look at what they stated after discovering their mutation rates were just like humans and ticked 100 times faster than expected compared to the evolutionary assumption rates. As you can see, a complete embarrassment for their theory, and more validation for young Earth creation. And you can read on the bottom that they concluded this study by saying the higher mutation rate results have not been accepted by many scientists. Now you know why. And here is yet another observable genome study of human genetic variation obtaining young Earth creation numbers as well. This 2009 study, which even added and assumed archaeological dates of early primitive man to be true, they still obtained results that confirm young Earth creation. They directly state, these within human estimates are also higher than estimates generated from phylogeny-based human-chimpanzee comparisons. Our new estimates established a rapid decay in evolutionary mutation rates between approximately 2,500 and 50,000 years ago. Yes, you heard it from evolutionists themselves again. A 6,000-year biblical timeline would not be out of this range. They're the ones that have to resort to a bottleneck as a rescuing device to fight against the observable evidence, as you can read for yourself. So now you can see the assumed human and chimp ancestry rates and the non-assumed human and chimp ancestry rates. I'll let you determine which one you want to believe. Now, again, what is the actual evidence compared to the story they tell us? Well, we only have one single line of both male and female lineage with low genetic diversity in the world today, which could only come from a single recent human common ancestor. 2, There is no genetic bottleneck evidence, even in their own geological column. 3. There is no actual genetic evidence for the story they wield about other human beings being alive prior to Eve. 4. There is no logical explanation why all these supposed 10,000 women living at the time of mitochondrial Eve, or the thousands and hundreds of thousands that lived before her, all died off while leaving zero biological trace of their existence. 5. There is no logical explanation why all these supposed children of these women who supposedly existed alongside of Eve all perished without a trace either. 6. It's completely illogical to conclude that all these 9,999 other women who supposedly lived alongside of Eve all died without leaving a trace, or that their 9,999 other women only produced male children. And yes, that's a theory, and that is why we only see one direct maternal line today. There is no possible way that that scenario is true scientifically, mathematically, or even logically. 7. There is no proof they lived at different eras in time either. As a matter of fact, there are even studies that have been done that show that the two lived at exactly the same place at exactly the same time, contrary to what they thought, given their theory. So even secular science proves that there is evidence that they lived at the same time, at the same place. Literally every rescuing device they use to fight against the observed actual evidence is more ridiculous than an episode of South Park. It's sad that the people do not see it because of their bias. But look at what they say. The audacity is astounding. Even if all the data pointed to an intelligent designer, such a hypothesis is excluded from science because it is not naturalistic. And that is because of their assumption bias that they say that. We know that the out of Africa theory is made up, and that the humans did not arise from the L1 node deep in Africa. We were created with what is known as created heterozygosity, and this is easily explained with genetics, which I will prove. You see, the Bible says that man was created in the Middle East, specifically in the Fertile Crescent. Well, what do people look like who live there? Well, they have brown skin. Evolution says that man arose in deep Africa at the L1 node, which would have made them have black skin, just like all Africans. What does science tell us about skin colors? Well, skin color, or melanin, is governed by multiple genes, and genes come in two pairs. 2 from each parent are inherited, just like letters in the alphabet. Let's look at A and B right now. As genes code for large amounts of melanin, are capital letters A and B, as where lowercase a and b will represent low melanin in the skin, so pale white people. Therefore, black skin races can only carry capital letter genes, capital A, capital B, capital A, capital B. They can only ever produce more black skinned people, just like white people, which carry all recessive lowercase gene letters and can only ever produce low amounts of melanin children. So Adam and Eve had to have been brown-skinned people, therefore to be able to code all the different skin colors for the people that we see on the earth today. So even simple genetics proves the out of Africa theory is wrong, and proves that the biblical created heterozygosity model is true.
We can see here that all the evidence regarding mitochondrial DNA, Y chromosome, the low genetic diversity that we see all points to Adam and Eve. Evolutionists need to ask themselves, if they have an open mind and they were to look for evidence for Adam and Eve, what would they expect to find? Because all human beings are profoundly similar genetically, and this points directly to the out of Africa scenario due to the resulting inbreeding of a population bottleneck of 10,000. How is this even remotely feasible? A Y chromosome of apes and man, and how they're so dissimilar, less than 70%. The Y chromosome should be the most similar.
Now before I finish this video, I just want you to ask yourself, this is a real simple question, okay?
If humans had started in Central Africa, where the L node is, and had been there the longest out of all places on Earth, then why does Africa lack what the rest of the world managed to all figure out? Africa never invented agriculture, never any form of mathematics, no writing systems, no calendar of any kind, no astrology, no farming, no megalithic structures have ever been found. They didn't even invent the wheel. So how do you explain humans spending more time in Africa than anywhere else on Earth, and then only after migration learned to do all of these skills while no one in Africa did? That makes no logical sense.
But you know what's interesting? When the Human Genome Project mapped the human genome, they said there's only one race of people. You know what that confirms? The Bible. Because we all go back to Adam and Eve, we're all one race.
That just makes the Bible consistent with nature on this one point.
Oh, well, that's good. I'm glad they agree on that.
For all those who appreciate the work that we're doing here on Standing for Truth, please hit that subscribe button because we are just getting started.